Good evening from Healdsburg. I'm Emily, the JetSetting Fashionista, and I am here tonight with Vanessa Wong of Peay Vineyards.
Hello.
What fun. We are neighbors and we didn't even realize till we started planning the logistics for this live. So give us a moment. I'm going to invite Andy Peay to join us. I think I already see him on there. We've got some waves from the West Coast Sonoma guys. Hey guys. All right. So this is Andy. Okay, give us 1 second. Vanessa's just going to entertain you with her.
Oh, yes, okay. So I'm actually glad that you are in Healdsburg. When I found out you were, it's just nicer to not have to come in remotely with these little squares, and we actually could be together. We're both double vaccinated. Woo!
Yeah.
And it's just nice, a little refreshing change from doing all these Zoom presentations and tastings remotely.
Yeah.
We're actually back to kind of some semblance of normalcy. So I'm very excited about that. This is my first in-person tasting.
Yay! Oh my God! And what a lucky girl! I get to do it with the winemaker herself. So this is pretty spectacular. And warning: if you hear a dog in the background, that's Miss Ernestine. But hopefully she'll be quiet. So let's get Andy on. Where are you, Andy?
There you go. Uh-oh.
Oh, Ernie. You're going to be disinvited.
Okay. At that other
Well, I guess while we're waiting for Andy, we will just show you guys what you have in store tonight so you can get a little sneak peek. I'm sometimes known as Miss Vanna White on these. So we are going to start with the 2018 Estate Chardonnay. Vanessa and I were actually just talking about that, so we're going to have some great discussions. And then the 2018 Estate Scallop Pinot Noir, which I actually bought that. Scallop Shell. I bought this when I visited. And then the 2017 Estate Syrah.
Les Titans.
Yes, she knows all the exact proper names. It's hard to be Vanna White and get the exact things. Oh, good. Here's Andy. Yeah. All right, Andy, we're going to invite you to join us. Perfect.
Yes, it's funny that that was my nickname when I was like in high school.
Really?
Vanessa. Like the letter turner.
Nice. Well, we got two Vanna Whites here, and there's Mr. Peay himself. Hi, Andy.
Hey there, how you doing?
Good.
We're just living the life in Healdsburg. We got your beautiful wines open, hanging out, shooting the shit, you know.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Gotta be warmer than down here. I'm shivering.
Oh, are you at Peay?
I'm in the East Bay.
Got it.
Nick's at Peay.
Nice. I know.
That's how we operate. We're a triangle. We drive a lot.
We triangulate.
Yeah, and that drive, I've done the drive. I mean, it's so worth it when you get up there, but that's not like an easy drive. You probably have to have an extra cup of coffee to be alert to do that.
Well, that and perhaps an empty bag.
Mean.
Most people arrive and they go, woof. Yeah, I need a minute to walk around, drink a glass of water, and let go.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Speaking of Peay Vineyards, I mean, we're totally going to get there, but I just got to plant the seed because Vanessa and I were just talking about my 3.5-hour visit when I visited. I basically didn't want to leave. I think you guys were really nice and didn't kick me out. But it's so spectacular. I think it like literally feels like heaven up there with the rolling hills. And, you know, part of, I think, the charm is, you know, you do go through that long drive and maybe throw up once or twice on the way. And then you get there and you're like, I made it. This is so worth it.
I think that's a severe deterrent.
I didn't throw up. I was fine. Andy's the one that said that.
No, I think it really is. It kind of brings home the point that, you know, we didn't go out there because this is the easiest thing to do. The easiest thing to do would be, you know, what I think Californians first did was plant in Carneros or Napa because they live in San Francisco. It's just right over the bridges.
Yeah.
We went out there looking to make a specific type of wine, to be able to capture a certain expression. And it certainly wasn't convenient. And, you know, financially, it's a nightmare because of the weather, which is why we can make the wines in the style we do. But it also means, you know, you have a lot of difficulty getting good yields, and a lot of farming costs are high because of the pressure of farming out there. But, you know, you do it and it's worth it. And you have to remind yourself every once in a while it's worth it when you're driving that road out there and you've just worked 16 hours and you're driving the truck back after processing fruit to do it again tomorrow.
Well, you got to stay at that fabulous guest house. I would not be driving back after a 16-hour day.
Oh,
I'm not sure we call that a guest house.
house.
What?
I think we call that my house. It's not really a guest house per se. I mean,
Oh, Andy's.
it has
no,
It's
I-
a guest house
Yes.
to you. because
I've never
you're
stayed
always
there.
our guest. So
well, anyway,
I'm going to start getting
so-
emails from people saying, so how do I stay at the guest house?
you gotta work, baby.
Oh, well, that's a good idea. Hey, maybe I'll come up for a day during harvest work. And I mean, it's not going to be a leisurely stay, but I would love to see what you guys do up there.
We
Better
believe
be
in
careful what you
the we believe in the Tom Sawyer approach. Come paint our fence anytime you want.
And
You know, you got to
cracked
work
that whip.
harvest. and stuff.
No, I'm sure she does, but I need to do that. I mean, I watched Harvest last year. I went with San Giacomo at like 5 a.m, which was super cool. I learned a ton, but I didn't actually really work it. I just worked the camera filming the guys doing it. So I think it would be a whole nother, well, guys and women, there was both. I think it would be a whole nother experience actually, like, you know, breaking my back for a day working hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually what happens is you spend the night, you wake up at 5, you get a cup of coffee, and you hop on the back of the tractor and you shuttle bins. And we've actually broken a few people.
Yeah.
They've been like, yeah, I could do this. This is fun. And then, you know, after about an hour, you're like, what happened to Adam? You know,
This is
Adam's
like
walking up the hill, he's like-
CrossFit times 100.
I mean, assuming I can take a lot of Advil because I do have a herniated disc and I can't lift a lot, but I could lift small bins.
The smallest one is
yeah,
about 30
well,
pounds.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
let's just say that Nick is the grape grower. He fattens up during the growing season. And then come harvest, despite a steady diet of chips and beer, he manages to lose a lot of weight because that's what he does every morning for about 40 plus days.
Wow.
I don't think he's going to appreciate you calling him fat.
All right. A little thicker around the waist, but
He
he's
was
lean
very
by the
fit
end of
and
harvest.
healthy when I met him, Andy. Must have been right after harvest. And actually, I think that's when I went up in the fall.
There you go.
There you go.
Anyway, well,
Okay.
cool. Well, should we talk? So I'm really excited. Vanessa and I did an interview together a while ago, and oh my God, you were blowing up. That's one of my like most read interviews. So apparently, people are dying to learn about Vanessa. So if you haven't read it, read the interview on the blog. But I sort of want to talk about like how you got to Peay. I mean, you have a fabulous history. Your wines are fabulous. There's a fabulous brothers. The whole story is fabulous. Can you tell us a little bit about it for people that don't know?
Like from the way back? Or
Like what hospital you were born at?
I was born in San Francisco, and I from parents who immigrated from China, and they have zero background in wine, totally. And but I grew up in the city, and one of my very, very first jobs was in a wine and cheese shop in Laurel Village. And I was actually, even before that, I was working for a caterer.
Oh.
So we would like prep the cheese plates, and well, back then it was the 80s, so it was like, you know, brie and pesto everything. So we would prep stuff, serve it, clean up, and I was like 14 or maybe 13 at the time. And so this woman, she would, you know, kick back, sit down on a couch, and she said, "Would you like a glass of wine?" And
She was 13 or 14.
yes. And I worked with my sister. She's the one who got me, you know, the gigs. And I look at her. She's 6 years older than I am. And I looked at her, and she's like, "Sure, you know." And so we would sit there and have a glass of wine. And I remember very clearly, she poured this glass of wine. It was Chardonnay. I remember exact wine. It was 1983. That's like showing my super old
You
age.
look like you're 25, so just keep going with it.
83 Glen Ellen Chardonnay.
Ooh.
And, you know, with the yellow label and everything. And I remember looking at it going, wow, this wine has a name. It isn't just like white wine or Hardy Burgundy.
Table wine.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, what is Chardonnay? It's amazing. And so my sister, who is, you know, she's 6 years older than I am, she was studying at City College, because they have a hotel and restaurant management.
Yeah, I've been to some.
They have a restaurant.
And they
there.
also have an annual thing where they make dinners, and I've been a judge for a few years at restaurants.
It's a good program
Yeah.
for a community college.
It's great.
And so she used to get books about wine service, beer, and, you know, as a junior high schooler, I used to like read these books and was so fascinated by the way they were describing wine, the descriptors. They would have these maps, you know, Germany.
I've got a lot of those books inside. I can go grab them. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So, you know, and of course I hadn't even really had much exposure to drinking wine itself. But I remember just being really super fascinated by just so many aspects of it. And so then I worked in the wine and cheese shop, and I was really, really interested in cheese.
We do have some cheese on the table because she said this in the interview.
I'm a cheeseaholic.
So we've got some triple cream, some blue cheese, but
and
we're not really going
to eat it. I had to learn all those things. Bloomy rind, semi-soft, triple creme, this kind of thing. And they hired me because I was really into cheese, and they needed some help selling the cheese. But I also had to sell wine. But who takes wine advice from a 14-year-old?
Well, little do they know that you were chasing quite a bit, maybe.
And it was funny because it was a place that was a little bit ahead of its time. They didn't sell a lot of wine. They sold mostly sandwiches and coffee beans because of just the lunch crowd that was there. So the wine selection got smaller and smaller and smaller. And now, I mean, the shop closed down, but now there's like 2 standalone wine shops and 3 cheese shops in that neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. So, I used to live over there.
Yeah.
Is it the one by that grocery store, the high-end grocery store everybody loves?
It used to be next to Ms. Brown's Feed Bag.
Okay. Well, there's an Ace Hardware there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it was... So I learned a lot about cheese, and I really, really wanted to be a cheesemaker. But
look at Andy. He's like, huh. Did you know the story, Andy? The cheese story?
Oh, yeah. I've never heard it quite as detailed, but I know the story.
So I really wanted to learn how to make cheese. But back then, they didn't have artisan cheesemakers. Mm-hmm. You had, like, factory, you know, Wisconsin giant.
I'm from Illinois. I do love my Wisconsin cheeseheads.
So, yeah, and or you had to, like, join an order of nuns who, you know, cloistered themselves and, you know, had the one wooden bucket that they got the milk from. And so, but I have a sister who's 3 years older than I am. And at the time, she was studying at UC Davis. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so she was studying pre-med, and she handed me the course catalog, which is like the thing where you look through and see all the courses, what classes you need to take to fulfill a certain major. And I came upon viticulture and enology. And I looked at the descriptions and microbiology, biology, chemistry. I went, I can't believe it. You can learn how to study how to make wine.
Yeah. I
go, there's actually a major. And it has stuff that I like to do. And so I told my parents that, look, it's the same stuff as my sister's doing. And if it falls through, I could always do pre-med. It's the same stuff.
I love it how pre-med was the backup to winemaking. That a girl.
No, in theory, you know, this is how you convince your Asian parents that won't have pragmatic, careers.
So then you went to Davis.
Yes, I went to UC
Davis. And I guess the rest was history.
Well, that's where I met Nick the first time.
Oh, I haven't heard this story. Little lovemaking, Andy.
No, I thought he was strange when I first met him.
You weren't wrong.
He was a really eccentric guy, very lovable, but I barely knew him. We barely crossed paths because he started while I was doing my year abroad in France.
Okay.
So I decided that, you know, Davis is great. There's a lot of very great scientific background that you learn as a basis for things, because there's definitely, they've been making wine for centuries without knowing science, you know. But I feel that to have the science background helps you to understand wine.
Right.
So you may not approach wine from such a technical standpoint, but you have to understand why. You know, you follow the science. This is not faith-based winemaking. Oops. And you know, so it's always good to know what you're talking about.
So you graduated from Davis.
And I went abroad to France to
Okay.
study winemaking, viticulture and enology there.
Great.
Very different approach, different way of doing it. And then I came back, and then I went back to France to work. and then went to Australia to work.
Wow.
And I came back and I settled in Napa Valley. And
And Robert Mondavi, was that
yeah,
role?
that Mondavi was my first full-time winery job.
That is quite a name to have on your resume.
Well, it's a big winery, and you do a lot of stuff.
It's exciting.
And,
Well, you know, I mean, didn't you just skip a bunch of name dropping you could have done in France as well?
oh,
Yeah, we didn't really talk about where you worked in France.
so in France,
Andy wants to know, inquiring minds.
yes.
Yeah, I'm
worked
curious. I don't know.
At, Chateau Lafite, Rothschild, in Bordeaux,
Mhm.
in Pauillac, and also at Domaine Jean Gros in Bonneau-Menet, which is now Domaine Michel Gros.
Wow.
So I worked with Michel Gros at his parents' estate and for his wines too.
Wow. Yeah, what a pedigree, seriously. So then what part, so you were in Napa, and then how did you get to the Sonoma side, and how did you, and Peay, I haven't actually heard this story, like how did you guys decide to start Peay? And maybe we should drink some Chardonnay while we're talking about this in case we have viewers at home that are getting thirsty. I mean, hopefully you've already started without us guys, but do you have the Chardonnay open, Andy?
Oh, yeah. I've been drinking for hours. I don't know what, you know, you're just getting started.
Okay, well let's answer that question while we sip on this beautiful Estate Chardonnay. So yeah, so how did you get from Napa to Sonoma, and what was the inception of Peay?
So I was the winemaker at Peter Michael
Yes.
and make a lot of Chardonnay there. Estate grown Chardonnay, meticulously farmed
Where are their vineyards again?
in Knights Valley.
Okay.
Or on the hills of Knights Valley.
Got it.
And so one day when it was a very late harvest, and Nick was working at Flowers Vineyard. He was on the harvest crew there. And they had all their interns arrived, and they had nothing to do because they cleaned up the winery and they were still waiting for grapes to come, but it was a very late vintage, so they just had nothing to do. So they called me up and said, can we come and visit and taste wines? I said, sure. And so we're tasting, the group arrives, and Nick comes up and goes, hi, do you remember me? And I said, of course I remember you. How could I forget Nick Peay? It's like unforgettable dude. Anyway, so we talk and everything, and then he calls me later that night. I don't know how he got my phone number, but he calls me and he goes, hi, it's Nick. And I went, Nick who?
How could I forget, Nick? I've already forgot.
But
Unforgettable.
we went out on a group date, you know, where we went to a bar with a bunch of people from the winery, and you know, hung out. And then we went on a Christmas shopping date, I guess, on the pretense that he needed to find Andy a good Christmas present.
That's a good brother.
And you should have seen what he tried to choose for you. That really
I've
was
received
they
those
were
presents for years.
giant pair
I
of
know.
Madras plaid shorts, which would go with it.
Oh my God, I was telling Vanessa you were the best dressed vintner at Pinots and Plaid, and she's like, I don't doubt it. He's got a great wardrobe.
I called you Beau Brummel, so, you know.
Well, so okay, you went on all these dates. So fast forward, how did Peay get started?
Oh, well, then you'll have to ask Mr. Peay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
I'm actually gonna finish that in that when she was the winemaker at Peter Michael, they were also putting a vineyard in on the Sonoma coast south of us in the Fort Ross Seaview area, and
Okay.
so she was learning about, you know, what it's like to farm out there on the West Sonoma coast, and then started walking the vineyards with Nick. And I believe it was our fourth leaf. Maybe it was third leaf. She was tasting a little bit of Chardonnay that was on the vine. You can take over anytime you want, Vanessa. And she
I
was like,
holy crap, this fruit is amazing. It really, like, I worked with a lot of Chardonnay. I worked with, 500 barrels at Franciscan, and then, 300 at Peter Michael, and never had fruit that had that much minerality, intensity, lightness at the same time. Such amazing flavors. And I said, I thought I would never want to work with Chardonnay ever again in my life, but I said, but I need to work with this Chardonnay.
Wow.
So
then you guys, did you buy the land, or you already had the vineyard?
right, okay, so we already had the land. I mean, so the way I tell the story, the way I put it is that I brokered the deal. We needed an amazing winemaker, and my brother needed a wife. And Vanessa,
you each got something good in it.
Vanessa needed a great vineyard, and so we did it old-fashioned style. And so that's what I learned in negotiations and business school, and I got it done. And I haven't done anything right ever since. But that's the way I tell it.
Well,
I've been known to sometimes have a factual problem, but I think a story is more important.
I think your version of the story is great, and I'm always going to remember, because I didn't know they were married when I went to visit. So, like, had I already heard the story from you, I would have, like, known the context. And I met your brother because Ernie got lost. So I was wandering. I'm like, have you seen it? And I'm like, oh, hi, who are you? And it was Nick. So, like, it was really funny. But I didn't know till after that Vanessa and Nick were together. And, like, so, like, I put the puzzle together later. So had I heard about this broker of the deal, I would have just known.
Well, I mean, I'm sure when you saw Nick, it wasn't obvious. I mean, he was probably, dirt and grease head to toe,
I didn't. He didn't have a sign on him like, I'm married to the winemaker Vanessa. You're right. It wasn't obvious.
Well, so the way that we found what became Peay was Nick, after Davis, he'd gone there as a grad student for enology and viticulture, and he had gone down to Santa Cruz Mountains and was down there making wine for a winery in Santa Cruz. And he kind of talked me into checking out wine, because I'd already tried banking, and that was a disaster for me. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I love New York.
You'd be a great banker, Andy. You're so smart.
Well, I could,
You wouldn't like it, though.
I looked good in a suit, and I could probably, afford to buy a lot more wine had I stuck to it. But I figured it wasn't for me. So anyway, I thought I'd be a chef, and that's a pretty difficult life. I learned pretty quickly, and
much better hours as a winery owner.
Yeah, people said, actually, a friend of mine.
Yeah, not a winemaker. Don't notice how I said that. Those are not better hours.
No, but my friend Debbie Zacharias, Debbie at the time was a wine buyer at a place named EOS in San Francisco.
Yep.
And she was like, you want to be a chef? I mean, you realize it's when you're a chef, when you're working, everybody else is out having fun. So it's weekends and holidays. And if you want to have children, those are not the hours children live. And I was like, wow, okay, you're not really selling this.
Smart woman, not only with wine, but with business coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my brother's like, check out wine. So I went to Kane, went to Davis a little bit, went to Kane, worked for Chris Howell for a harvest. He's amazing. And said, okay, that's more interesting. And then worked at a bottle shop in San Francisco, and my head exploded. I'm like, I must do this.
A bottle shop?
And the jug shop.
Oh, I don't know that, but it sounds cool.
And so then after that, well, during that, my brother and I started looking for land. It took us a couple of years. We went all over the place down in what's now Santa Barbara County, Santa Rita Hills. Some people bought that, made it a famous vineyard. We looked at some land there.
Oh, does it start with BN? Well, that's
no,
Santa Maria.
Yeah, Sanford and Benedict was actually around, but it was right after that.
I was getting a Pianacito, but wrong.
Oh no, Pianacito's already planted too. Actually,
okay.
We were talking to them about maybe buying a little fruit to get us started, but instead Nick's whole thing was, look, we need to be in a place where we can retain our acidity, not struggle with the California sun, so our sugars don't go racing and our acids don't fall. We have a longer growing season, get more earthiness, more floral and tea notes in addition to the fruit that we're going to get from California. And so he was like, coastal, you got to get up against that cold Pacific Ocean. Yep. It's 53 degrees year round. It's your fan in the refrigerator that's keeping your temperatures moderate. And that's why you can have that freshness and energy in the Chardonnay that Vanessa was talking about when she tasted the fruit. And so we went all over the place. And one morning I woke up on the Lost Coast in Humboldt County, where I was camping out in a bivy sack, looking around like we would basically trespass. I mean, since we're talking about serving alcohol to 14-year-olds, we would trespass on logging roads.
This will be on my YouTube video, by the way, Andy. But anyway, on my YouTube
it's too late now. It's statute of limitations.
Yeah, trespassing, it's called public land.
And we would take photos. And we would take photos and say, okay, where is this on the U.S. Geological Survey maps?
Yeah. Where
they tell you who owns it. And then we would try to figure that out. And, that was leading to a lot of timber companies who were not interested in selling. And one morning I stopped in and heard about a listing down the coast in the very northwestern corner of what's Sonoma County near Sea Ranch. And Sea Ranch is like a residential community on the coast there, and no one had really planted up there. I drove up there. It was cold. It was windy. It was an old sheep ranch, an apple orchard. And Nick came up, took soil samples, and rest is history.
Wow.
We planted it. We bought it in
I didn't know
'96.
that. There was apples there before.
Oh yes.
You know, there weren't a lot left,
Yeah.
There's
but we still
are.
have
Yeah, about 40.
20 or 30 apple trees.
Oh, I was a little distracted looking at the vines. I didn't notice the apple trees.
Well, we're the same way. You know, the apples are great, but they come ripe at the same time as the grapes. You know, like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's some early ones, the Gravensteins, and some late ones that are making really, really good pies and eating in the late.
Yeah, so I mean, the homesteaders grew them for baking. So they're thinking about something different than the eating apples. And then there's also cider. There's no kiln on property where they used to dry the apples out and then
Oh
take
my
them
gosh,
down.
I need to come back for this apple tour. I didn't get any of this information while we were talking about wines and visiting the vines.
And apples are a really great indicator plant for grapevines because they have a nice, they need a good dormancy, so cold period. And so that's why it's always good to see what other crops are.
If apples can grow, it would be good.
Yeah.
So it's funny, I feel like in some of my vineyard tours, I've heard of other vineyards that had apples first, and then the winemakers would, you know, be like, sometimes you can like smell and taste the apples. Do you feel like there was enough of the apples
it's
present?
A little bit more romance than.
Okay, a little bit of stress.
You know, we also have 4 or 5 Bartlett pear trees that are ancient, 100 and something years old, and they have the most amazing fruit.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that.
I warned
You don't-
Vanessa that I'd probably have to be topping off with my Coravin because I love her Chardonnay so much, and I'm already topping off.
We could talk about the Chardonnay.
Yes, let's talk about the Chardonnay. Would you like? I'm
So
gonna give you a
the
topper.
thing about the grapes there, so you know, Andy was talking about this this climate, and the soil is not super hospitable to creating plants that are big plants that can have higher yields. We have small plants, small grapes, but good intensity. I remember when Andy first showed me their business plan about like the yields, and I went, I think you need to take that by half.
Really?
And then I was even wrong like that. We had to take it even like 60%.
So this is what Andy's talking about. It's a very expensive region to
Yes.
plant because you're not getting as much production
Yeah,
per
and-
acre.
and-
Or hectare. They all call it the hectares and W set. So I'm thinking hectares these
It's the
days.
same thing.
Acres. Well, I think hectares is funny in the U.S.
You can use them. Well, it's not hectare, but hectare.
No,
you
I know. I'm just being funny. Anyway, keep going.
So we have several different clonal selections of the Chardonnay, and they were all selected for offering something different, a different aroma and structure for the wine. So we have a couple of heritage clones. We have the Hyde clone, the Hyde selection,
I love the hype.
and that gives amazing structure and amazing perfume. It's like the backbone of the blend. Unfortunately, it doesn't produce a lot of fruit, so it's always hard to use that. So in volume-wise, it's not the major component, but in character, it definitely is the major component. And then we have some. Then we have the Robert Young selection.
Oh my God, who's right up the road in
Yeah,
Geismar?
and
I've been to Robert
His is
Young.
more of the flesh.
Yeah.
You know, it rounds out. It's a little warmer in terms of like the profile. A little bit more stone fruit.
Mhm.
And then we have the Dijon selections. We have Dijon 76, which gives some nice highlights. Not a lot of stuffing. And Dijon 95 and 96, which definitely have, it sort of fills out all the notes that are in between. So there are that clean fruit. And but on top of the fruit aromas, we do so we whole cluster press. So we get this really nice fine juice, and we ferment in barrel without adding yeast. It's just the indigenous fermentation. So what that is very slow fermentation and very evenly paced. It takes like about a couple of months for the fermentation to take place. And what it does is it provides a amazing balance of the palate. It's smooth. There's no kind of, it's not disjointed. It's very smooth and creamy.
Now, when you
without being
ferment, are
heavy.
they all they're fermenting separately?
Yes, so I mean, everything, that's the thing about this vineyard is like, I will pick, you know, we have our own crew, so I can say, I will only pick these 4 rows.
Yeah.
And they do it.
Yeah.
So, because I will taste them. I'm like, no, not those. And these. And sometimes I'll stop in the middle of the row and, you know.
Yeah.
But, so, yeah, because every aspect, the different aspects have a different ripening time. And thank goodness they don't all ripen at the same time.
Right.
Because that would really, really hard. But the timing is right. And so I'm tasting them and deciding, you know, we'll take this half here and then go back down to over here. And
Yeah.
so they're all fermented separately.
Well, so when you talk about aspect, because people that haven't been there, it's definitely like a hilly site. I mean, it's so beautiful, so beautiful. But like, so maybe, where do you start? At the bottom?
We start where it's ripe.
But doesn't the bottom usually ripe sooner than the top?
Not
the top's
necessarily.
cooler?
No.
It's kind of the other way around. Usually the top of the hill, usually because it
Thinner soil.
loses its source of water, weaker soils, probably more sun exposure because it's later in the year. It'll get, the lower blocks get shaded from the trees. So usually it's the top of the hill, usually southeast, south, then southwest. You know, it's kind of like a grid. It's one of the things that Vanessa, you know, says that we're able to pick into all these little groups because they ripen at different time. And that's over time we figured out that, you know, she'll say, okay, just these 3 or 4 rows. And so we'll end up picking Chardonnay in what, like 7 or 10 blocks and
Yeah.
Pinots in 30, 35 individual blocks.
35 different times, like separate sections.
Yes.
And the way I think about it, that what Vanessa's talking about, the clones, because I don't want to bore people too much talking.
Oh, I love to talk about clones, but yeah, let's think of our audience. Good thinking.
But the way that you think about clones is to think about it like colors on your palette if you're a painter. They're going to have top notes, medium notes, base notes, color. You'd have bright high tones. You'd have some mid. You can layer them, create depth and texture. You know, if you have this clone that's very racy, like the hide, it's got great minerality and acidity. It's kind of the backbone of Peay. It's kind of what people, when they think about Chardonnay for Peay, they're like, yeah, there's like linearity going on. But then she's got some of these other clones that add a little bit of fat and texture without being flabby. Because that would be, you've had those Chardonnays, they're just like blah.
Yeah.
Having these various ones, she can craft a textured, harmonious, complete wine. And I think that makes a difference. I think it's true for our Pinot Noir as well. 15 different selections picked into 30, 35 lots. She can blend them into these different wines that have their own profiles, but they all have a completeness to them.
And would you say like year after year, like the ratio of what you do for each clone is pretty similar for the estate, or you'll just assess it annually?
A little bit of both. I mean, when we started creating the blends, I just had all these different lots, and I wanted to think about, wow, we have this vineyard, and it has these different sort of statements, these different personalities from area to area, and like some are more floral, some are more earthy, some are more fruity, and some are spicy. And so, you know, at the very beginning, I thought, okay, I want to really highlight this characteristic, and especially with the Pinot, because there were so many components. I was putting them together, and I thought, okay, I've got these 2 great blends, and when I tasted them, because, you know, I blended them for balance and everything, they're almost the same. I had 2 different but the same, and I was like, no, and I need to like make it a little bit more of a statement of one kind of characteristic, one kind of personality.
Yeah.
And so what I ended up with is Scallop Shelf, which is the next wine that we're doing tasting. It has more of a classic aroma where it's red fruits.
Maybe we just start
Okay.
sipping and smelling this scallop.
Red fruits, black tea, cherry skin, and this kind of thing. It's more classic structure.
I'm gonna do a little Vanna White, or Vanessa Vanna White, as she calls it. So guys, this is the Scallop Shelf, which, not to pick favorites, but I did buy a few of these, and I always know that whatever I buy is what my favorite is. So I think this is my favorite Pinot.
So
I think you just showed Savoy.
No, that was Scallop Shelf. It's just a little backwards.
Was it? Okay, I didn't have my glasses on. Oh, it was backwards. That's why. Okay.
Sorry. You gotta love Instagram Live. They gotta figure out how to not make it backwards or something.
Okay. And then, so that was Scallop Shelf. And then the other blend was Pomarium, which means apple orchard in Latin, paying homage to the fact that our property used to be a working apple farm. And Pomarium is definitely got more of that forest floor, wild strawberry, spice, prosciutto.
Earth.
Yeah, a little earthier, a little bit more, dare I say, masculine.
Do you think that's probably a little better with food, and then maybe this one you don't need food? Like the descriptors you're saying.
Both. I very rarely drink wine alone without anything except for champagne. So
I know you do love champagne. There was one takeaway on Vanessa's interview. She doesn't like to spit champagne, and she likes champagne. Like I was like, we should drink champagne together. I feel like I noticed a common love.
You can't spit champagne. That's just weird. It's just weird. Yeah. And so I mean, for me, all wines, food is part of life, and wine growing regions, people who grow wine, they eat the food from that region, and so there's always sort of a symbiotic kind of relationship between food and wine, and so it's hard for me to say, well, this is more of a sipping wine, or this is more of a...
Well, what I mean by that, it's nice when people describe like a little bit bigger, earthier, I don't know. I drink a lot of wine, and I drink a lot of wine with food, but then sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I could just drink a glass of this on its own, and it's not, big enough that you need the food to to soften it almost.
I mean, I think they can both be had without food and appreciated, but there's so much more to offer on both sides of food and wine when you come together. They might not pair with the same things. But Pomarium is definitely something that kind of grabs you a little bit more up front, a little faster, whereas Scallop Shelf is a little bit more reserved. It takes some time to develop.
I liked your female versus male analogy.
I know, it's so sexist. I shouldn't do that.
Well, I don't know. With the descriptors and the flavor profiles, I'm seeing how it is. Is Andy still there? He looks maybe frozen.
Yeah.
I am.
Okay.
So to avoid the gender, I usually say muscular.
Oh.
So
I'm sorry.
I think
muscular.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Large framed.
We're not going to claim that.
I'm basically trying. I think the way that I would think about your question,
I don't
Emily,
think
is
there's anything bad about having like a gender connection with wines. I mean, if you're like, oh, this is more masculine, this is more delicate and feminine and lovely. I use those expressions a lot. But yeah, they're just good descriptors for, I mean, we don't have the other Pinot Noir here, so I'm going to have to try that next time we're together.
Yes.
But this one's spectacular. And I feel really bad if anybody at home is like commenting, because we're sitting in the garden with the tripod, so I can't really see the comments.
Yeah.
But if you guys, please comment, if you're drinking along with us, or what, even if you're not drinking a Peay Pinot, I'm sorry if you're not, cheers. Hopefully you're drinking something and just listening to me and Vanessa and Andy, because this is like my favorite way to spend an hour learning from people like this with wines that I love. And hopefully whatever you're drinking, you're doing the same thing at home.
So to answer your question about whether the blends are the same or not, is when I started making the blend the following year and the subsequent year after that, I began to notice that they were coming from the exact same parts of the vineyard.
Okay.
So it was a revelatory sort of experience for me to find, like, we were making terroir-based wines. The expression that I'm finding is based on its location in the vineyard. However, from year to year, I will assess the different lots every single time, and the vintage does play a part, where you have some vintages where the blocks, like one of the components in Scallop Show, which is Dijon Clone 777 from block 10, 10B. In some years, it can be very fruity, and some years it can definitely have more floral components. And sometimes it's split it, because it has a little bit of both. And so it just depends. And
the weather, so many factors.
Weather.
Yeah. Fog, rain, harvest.
And the farmers we like to complain.
Do you guys get hail up in?
We have not.
In Annapolis, no?
No, we have not. I know that in France, that can be extremely devastating.
In spring and fall frost.
Yeah.
Do you guys get frost?
We do have frost, and a lot of people find that surprising because we are so close to the ocean. But and the ocean is a moderating factor in terms of like the heating up part. When it's cold in the spring, the weather out there, the cold air moves like it's like a molasses blob, and so when it goes into these gaps, these incursions, it just comes in, and we're surrounded by forest, and so that acts like a wall, and all the cold air kind of settles down and cools down into the lowest spot of the vineyard, and in those places, and in one year in probably less than 10, we can have a frost event.
Wow.
And it's devastating.
And then you lose those grapes because they freeze? Or do you guys have fans, or do you like
we have
counteract
fans
it with
now.
stuff?
We don't have the fans that are tall that mix the inversion layer. We have these low sitting fans at the very bottom of the vineyards that suck the cold air in and push it up.
Yeah.
So it keeps it moving. Because what's dangerous for grapevines in the springtime is the cold air freezing those buds, freezing the little shoots.
Yeah.
You ever think about
Before
what?
bud burst, and then they don't burst.
No. This is after.
It's after.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you think about what lettuce looks like in the back of your fridge when it freezes,
Yep.
that's exactly what happens to little grape shoots, and they will recover. They will grow again, but when they grow again, they often don't have any fruit. And they're also, some will freeze and some won't, and so you have very uneven. You'll have some, within the same plant, you'll have some that ripen earlier and some that ripen later. It's just a headache.
Yeah.
It's devastating. But we haven't had hail, cross fingers, but I'm not saying
Yeah.
So,
Okay, good. Great. Well, this Pinot is super beautiful. Maybe I should stand up and look at comments in case anybody's saying anything we should respond to.
Scallop, yeah.
Well,
Andy and Vanessa are going to talk while I'm looking.
Okay.
so Derek is monitoring the chat.
Oh, good.
But one of the things I would say about the Pinot Noir is you're describing some of the differences, and the way I think about it is they all should go well with food. It's just different, whatever the ingredients are on the food that dictate what goes well with food. And Nick, Vanessa, and myself, we all come from a background of cooking and love food and love to cook and cook all the time. And so we're not trying to make big macho wines that blow food off the plate. We want it to be harmonious, not only within the wine, but also with food. So that kind of drives our sensibility, drives Vanessa's sensibility when she's thinking about when to pick and how to make it. And I think that's true with all the winemaking. Different blocks, different clones, different varieties might get treated a little differently in the winemaking, but the sensibility is the same. The goal is to bring out the expression of that fruit. And so in our different wines, you're not going to taste Pomarium versus Scallop Shelf or Alma Pinot and be like, whoa, this is a right turn, because the desire of what she's looking for, not necessarily exact flavors, but the experience is the same. So they'll all have the forest floor tea finish. That's in all of our Pinots, every vintage, different amounts. We think that's kind of terroir expression, but the fruit expression up front, maybe the floral notes will be a little different based on the clones. We don't do a lot of whole cluster. We do a little bit.
Oh, that was one of my questions, Andy. When do you do whole cluster on all of them or just a few of the Pinots?
Some lots.
Okay. So lots. So it's not an entire bottle. Okay.
No, I had to assess the clusters themselves, the stems themselves, whether it will work well with that fruit.
Okay.
What's happening in the vineyard at that very moment, and sometimes you have clusters that they call shatter a lot, and so the berries don't completely develop, and you get all these little green things, and you don't want to do that.
Right.
So, or you have a lot of what I call flower detritus. It's just the little caps, little brown caps off the flowers. You don't want all that in there too, and if you have a lot of that, it's not a good candidate.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for good, solid candidates, and never do anything blanket, like, dogmatically, we got to do it this way. It's just so, very geared towards whatever's happening at that moment, that vintage, for those grapes. You can't make a decision just like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So.
Well, no wonder your wine.
Yeah, the way I put it is Vanessa's very much thinking about what is that that block that she's picked, that she's making as a separate wine, what does it need to help bring out its expression? So, for example, Calera Selection Pinot Noir is a bit of a darker, more of a sit-down squat style of Pinot Noir. It's got more earthy bay olive notes and things like that. So it can handle a little bit of a whole cluster to give it lip, but you got to be thinking, okay, I don't want the flavor to be whole cluster flavor. I want it to taste like the vineyard. In addition, I don't want to take the tannins out of whack, because then that's going to distract you when you're drinking it. It's all about the harmony of the wine, so you can experience the wine. If you have a wine that's too tannic or too stemmy or too oaky or too whatever, as a human being, you smell it or you put it in your mouth, and that thing that's out of balance grabs you. And that's why 10 years ago, when In Pursuit of Balance was going on, a lot of people were looking at alcohol and focusing on that. And it's like, the whole point of having a balanced wine is that if it's harmonious, then its individual expression can come out, regardless of its alcohol. So that's what I think Vanessa's thinking about. She's like, no, this vintage, is not a good vintage for a lot of whole cluster, either because of the health of the stems or the fruit, mildew or whatever, or because it's going to be a tannic vintage and I don't want to take it out of whack and tannins or whatever. Just not right stems. It'll be too green and tomatoey or whatever.
Okay.
Well, we don't want.
Yeah, no.
Jalapeno. Don't do that.
Very interesting. Wow. So how many Pinot Noirs do you make?
So we have Scallop Shelf, which is what we're tasting. The other one is called Pomarium. And we have a third named cuvee from our estate called Ama. And then we also make a Sonoma Coast blend that is mostly from our estate. And we also make a vineyard designate from Savoy Vineyard, which is in Anderson Valley, which is not at all Savoy. In our, not part of our estate. But we find that they actually approached us in 2011 and wanted to sell us some fruit. And we said, absolutely, this is...
We would love to take your fruit.
And what I love about Savoy Vineyard is that it is, they farm it as, because they make wine themselves. This is a very important part. When you farm it to make wine yourself, you go the extra distance to farm it to make wine, and you do the extra things. And I don't know, for them, they have a lot of clients, so it's amazing how they keep it all like straight and everything. But what I love about Savoy Vineyard is so distinctly different from our own vineyard in terms of the flavor profile, and it's unique, and it has this signature smell, and I really enjoy working with it.
Yeah, I was just in Anderson Valley 2 weeks ago for Pinot Fest, which was super fun.
Oh, they had it?
They had it. It was like socially distanced, so you just made a couple reservations with like a party of 2 or 3, and it was awesome. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Anderson Valley. I don't think I've had your Savoy Pinot. Unless, Andy, do you remember if you poured that at the Ferry Building fundraiser in 2017? I was telling Vanessa, I think that's when I first met you.
Yeah, I don't think I did. We don't make a lot of it. We only make 300 or so cases.
Yeah.
And I love having it as in my quiver because it is different. And it's a little bit more fruit driven. It's a little softer and juicier relative to our wine, not relative to warmer areas that are making Pinot Noir. But it's just a little bit friendlier, perhaps. And so it's different. It's distinct. So when I'm pouring our wines, and usually I'll pour the Savoy after the Sonoma Coast and before one of my estate wines, you can see the buyer, what they're thinking about for their customers.
Yep.
And oftentimes I'll be like, oh yeah, that's going to go with, oh yeah, that's different.
So the Sonoma Coast, is that the one that if people saw you on a restaurant wine list, that would probably be the one, or it just varies by restaurant?
I think it really depends. Depends on your price point of your restaurants. The Sonoma Coast we make the most of.
Okay.
And I'm able to get some by the glass pricing in certain markets. And so you will see it more often.
Guys, if
by the
you
glass.
pay on the wine list, if you're not up for a bottle, definitely do a by the glass. It's so great.
Yeah, it's at a bunch of places in San Francisco right now. We've just released finishing up the 18 and releasing it in 19.
Oh, where can people find it in San Francisco? Do tell, please.
Well, I mean, by the glass, Progress State Bird's pouring it by the glass.
Right.
I'm going to get in trouble with all my customers because I can't remember off the
That's
top
all
of my
good.
head.
I'm going to Statebird in a
Memory.
month. I'll have it, and I'll tell Adam we talked about him and his great wine selections.
I think Derek will probably help you there.
It doesn't matter. I'm just asking. But Progress in Statebird, that's perfect. That's literally the next reservation I have in San Francisco, so I will be having Peay by the glass.
Yay.
So,
great.
And then you can see that these two wines are very different in color. The very last wine.
Yes, let's not forget about the
this-
Syrah.
The Syrah. Syrah. And one of the things about growing grapes out on a cool climate on the coast is that color the color becomes really, really dark for Pinot, but even more so for the Syrah. And for me, Pinot color is not that important. It's just Pinot is a light color. It's not that big of a deal, but for some reason, the cool sunlight makes for a very good tannin and phenolic development.
Oh yeah, I cannot even see through the Syrah. The
So,
letters on the napkin.
but harvesting Syrah right after the Pinot is, wow, totally different beast here. Totally different, very dark. And we farm Syrah out on the coast because we're nuts. It's crazy. We had a friend who came out to visit the vineyard. He's a friend that Nick and I had met when we were days at Davis, and his family, we very humbled. His family has been making wine for 500 years.
Wow.
So we just feel like
Is he from Europe?
it's Jean-Louis Chave.
Oh,
So
wow.
yes, you're like, we're not worthy. But he came out to visit our vineyard, and we were walking through the vineyard, and he asked us when we pick our Pinot. And I said, well, it's about like the third week of September when it really gets going. Some comes a little earlier, but third week of September. And he goes, oh, yeah, the same as us. And then he went, wait a minute, when do you pick the Syrah? And I went, well, later than that, like, mid-October.
Wow.
And he went, oh, my God, because we would have cold and rain by then that would just never work. So it is a cool climate. It is most ideal for Pinot and for Viognier in terms of when it ripens in the Chardonnay. Syrah is a bit of a stretch, and it is a cool climate. And every year, I tear my hair out. This is crazy. Why are we growing in here? I hope we can make it. But every year when we make it, I am rewarded after it's finished fermenting.
It's very
in
nice.
barrel. Like, this is why we do
So
this.
whose baby is this Syrah? Did you want to plant it, or Nick, or Andy?
Oh, Nick and Andy had like this passion.
Okay.
for
So
Syrah.
this is all you, Andy? This is you and your brother?
Well, yeah, this is where I need to interject because you just heard the winemaker's perspective. So, as the person who loves Syrah, I'm wearing my Syrah shirt today.
We can see you. It's still frozen. Darn it.
Oh well. So anyway, the reason why you can grow Syrah where you can barely grow Pinot and Chardonnay is that we get October. And we're in a desert climate. We don't get rain. We get a little spritzes in October. We don't get much. And it's one of the nicest times to be in Northern California. You all know who are from there. So we can pick up a couple bricks. And Vanessa's being generous when she says mid-October. We oftentimes are going into November, getting the last lots.
Try not to, though.
Wow. What about Thanksgiving? Gosh, this harvesting of the Syrah is really getting in the way of things.
Well, usually the Syrah goes to barrel right before Thanksgiving.
Pump over and stuff.
Yeah. And so, but the thing about Syrah is that the color is kind of this like electric psychedelic purple. It's not dark and black like Cornat. It's because, and also I would say what's unique about it, our Syrah, is that it's not just where it's grown, which is a lot of it. It's cool, so you get a lot of the white pepper, iron, blood, savory notes, and great acid and low alcohol. But also it's made by Vanessa, who is thinking about, she's not afraid to make wines with finesse. She's not macho. She's not like, I need to make a big black Syrah that's going to stain your teeth and like you have to have a big hunk of something. And I think the great Syrahs of the world are that way as well. As much as I love Cornas and I'm wearing a Cornas shirt, that is one of the riper, blacker, quote unquote cold climate Syrahs. The really great Syrah from Hermitage and Côte Rôtie, there's more going on. I think it's a little bit less hedonistic. It takes on more intellect, and I think that's to be desired. And in Vanessa's case also, she makes it kind of like she makes Pinot Noir. Yeah, we do a couple of pump overs because Syrah will get reduced if you don't introduce some oxygen during primary fermentation, but very gentle, and not really trying to extract the hell out of it and doing extended post-fermentation macerations or whatever. She's looking for aromatics. And I think we make two different estate Syrahs, and I think they are notable. And as the guy who's out there pouring them all the time, it almost always a buyer will be like, oh, okay, this is different. It's not like most U.S. Syrah. And it's not really like Syrah made from Europe. A customer of mine, the first time I poured it for him 20 years ago, said, you make wines that taste like they come from the Mid-Atlantic. And I kind of freaked out and was like, wait a second. I've just dumped a lot of money and a lot of my life into making wines from Virginia. And which no bang on Virginia, but I was hoping to make wines from the Sonoma coast. And he said, no, what I mean is you've got the structure of the old world as far as acidity and some of the earthy and more non-fruit oriented things. But you can see that there's California sun there. The West Coast, there's a little bit of lightness and brightness in the aromatics. And so you fall somewhere in the middle, like the Atlantic. So then I was, phew. But
yeah, that was a very interesting way. Yeah, it's funny because I don't think I knew you guys made Syrah, and then I had it when I visited, and yeah, it's lovely. It's and it's only 13.4 alcohol. I feel like it's on the lighter side, which is great because sometimes Syrah's like Zin, it can get a little big.
Oh yeah, we don't want to make Syrah that's disguising itself as Zin. No way. It's like moonlighting as peanut.
Yeah.
So,
and we're a little bit, we don't purposefully try to be different, but our Viognier is not like any Viognier that you've ever had. Not only does Vanessa not put any new oak on it, but being where it is so cold, you don't get the tropical fruit flavors. It has a little bit of texture, but it's not that big, heavily oil thing or bitter on the finish. It's got like lemongrass and ginger, and it's very fresh. It's the highest acid wine we make, not on purpose, just is. And so it's quite zippy, and it's on a lot of pairing menus because of that, because usually Viognier pairs with about carrot soup and that's about it. Mm-hmm. But our Viognier is great with, green flavors and seafood and things of that nature. It's paired with a hot pot dish right now at a restaurant in San Francisco.
Ooh, cool. Which restaurant?
Lazy Bear.
Oh, nice. God, I gotta add them to my to-do list too.
Oh, you do.
I'm too big of a picky eater that my friends like, you cannot go to Lazy Bear, they'll kill you, because it's 23 courses, and I probably have like 10 requests for 10 out of the 23. I'm not gonna be that person. I know when
tell me what is the picky thing about your food?
I don't like salmon. I don't like pork belly. I just don't like rich, big.
I cannot be your friend. She does not like pork belly.
The problem is, it's not a problem. It's a good problem. Like when you go and when you're like writing about restaurants, the chef always wants to send out like the biggest, most elaborate meal. And when you do that like quite a bit, it gets to be really filling and you feel like a beached whale. So,
just for a little bit,
but it's like a lot of nights in a row. So,
just one night.
I know Lazy Bear is spectacular.
You must embrace the Moby Dick beach whale feeling.
I know, the beach whale feeling. But so
you can fast for a week and a half or something
in between. But yeah, so we'll still be friends. We'll just sit and eat cheese and Pinot and Chard together.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you the nice thing about going out.
Be your friend.
What, Andy?
Nice thing about going out to dinner with Vanessa when you have those meals is that she doesn't drink all of her wine. She just has a couple sips and she'll leave a third of a glass.
I know,
so
look at this Chardonnay I wasted.
I'm constantly reaching for her wine.
See, what people don't understand is that, I'm sitting, so you can't see how tall I am, but I am tiny. My body weight cannot withstand too much indulgence in the wine department. So tasting is more important than drinking.
Oh, well, I'm glad. That's for her.
And you likely can tell from where I'm sitting that I have a lot more weight, so it's fine. But I'll take your wine. No problem.
I feel the same way, Auntie. Well, this has been so much fun. I feel like, wow, see how quickly this hour goes? Is there anything we forgot to say? So are you guys open? Like when can people visit you up at Peay?
So we're open at the Vineyard of the Winery, which is new for us. We used to not really be open to the public, but Derek Reimer, who is
amazing,
amazing, and as our national sales guy,
Yeah.
has been not doing a lot of hospitality because there's not a lot of national sales travel.
That's
And
who
so
hosted
we're
me,
open
and
now.
we wouldn't leave. We were having so much fun enjoying these beautiful wines in the beautiful setting.
Yeah, so he hosts people at the vineyard, which is gorgeous. If you go to our website, payvineyards.com, you'll see a view of it. That's your view when you're sitting with Derek. We have a tasting that has library wines and current releases and beautiful cheese plate, mostly from Andante Dairy, which is amazing, and salumi. And it's a great way to spend an afternoon. We also have tastings at the winery with our associate winemaker, Ryan. So we're doing a lot more of that. And we're booked out for June, but it's great.
Yeah.
So we highly encourage that and encourage you to buy the wine on our website. And
it's a super easy drive. I mean, it's a fairly easy drive from Healdsburg. I shouldn't say super easy, but it's beautiful. And what I would suggest, spend the night at Sea Ranch or go up to Mendocino for a night or two after. That's what I did. I was on my way to Mendocino, and it was the perfect little stopover. Or get a hotel room in Healdsburg and go up for the day, because it's magical, right. And you definitely want to be there for a few hours.
It's not something you try to hit and do nap on the same day.
It's like I would have that be like your midday stop, and then maybe come back to Healdsburg and wine taste in town and then go to dinner. But it's not like I'm gonna go from San Francisco to there to Napa to back to San Francisco. That would be a long day.
And if you reach out to us, Derek put together your perfect day, or 2 days, which includes going Hog Island, staying at Timber Cove, visiting, and going for a walk on a black beach on the coast at Sea Ranch. It's pretty amazing.
And I think I
then you go back to Healdsburg.
On West Sonoma Coast shared it. Thank you, Derek. There's a link, so you can click on that. And also, if you want to get the insider shots of what you'll experience, go to my blog and just look up Peay. I literally shared everything from our visit. It's dog friendly. Ernestine even went. He's over there taking a nap. Well, good. Well, Andy and Vanessa, I'm sad this is over, but anything else we want to cover? Oh, let me just give you guys a shout out, because I sort of met you, Andy. Well, I met you at that fundraiser, and then I met you again through the Meals on Wheels, and you guys have been spectacular supporters of Meals on Wheels, the gala. I'm on the wine committee, and I think that's sort of how our friendship solidified. So on behalf of such a great cause, and we couldn't raise all that money without chefs and restaurants and wineries like you guys and winemakers giving your wine and your time. So Andy, I know you're a huge supporter, the whole brand is, so thank you for that. Well,
it's our pleasure. It's the least we can do, and it's an organization that I've supported since the 90s when I was in grad school here.
Wow.
And so they do really good work.
And speaking of organizations, you were also a very big supporter of Pinots and Plaid, which will be coming back for 2022. I was telling Vanessa all about it. Maybe she'll come with you in her plaid attire.
Not if it's in October, but...
I know. Well, I'm going to do spring.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
So, yeah, Andy was one of my early founder wineries on board. So, yeah, Pinots and Plaid is coming back, and hopefully Peay will be there next time, too.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
watching. And this will also be on my Instagram TV channel. I'll give it to Peay if they want to post it, and it'll be on YouTube.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.